Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Junior Doan. Welcome to Uncommon Sense. My guest today is Diane Fong. Diane is the CEO of the Pulse 3 Foundation, formerly known as the Michigan Cardiovascular Institute Foundation. Welcome, Diane. Tell me about Pulse 3.
Well, Pulse 3 is a nonprofit organization serving the Great Lakes Bay region. It was created by a group of cardiologists and surgeons who wanted to see health and vibrancy brought to this region, specifically related to our hearts.
And what does it do?
We do all sorts of things. Our programming falls into 3 categories. Living, how can we help folks live healthier? Learning, how can we help our medical community be aware of the latest advances in healthcare? And then life-saving, what can we do as regular, ordinary citizens to be empowered to save lives?
I wouldn't have thought the medical community needed education. I thought that was part of their job to stay up.
Oh, absolutely, but medicine changes so quickly. And there's so many branches of medicine. So when we look at a cardiac patient who's coming to the hospital, it's not just that specialist who will see him or her on the operating table, it's the paramedic who's responding to the scene, it's the emergency room physicians and caretakers, all the way through outpatient. So when we do learning activities, we are bringing that entire continuum of care together to learn from one another, because we can identify weaknesses in the system and we can find ways to fix those.
Interesting. Do you, I'm not technical, so maybe you interpret the question the right way, but I understand some of the EMS ambulances carry things for heart attack or stroke, and some do not. But some treatments are time sensitive. You have to get them to the patient and in the patient within a defined number of minutes. Do we have, what are those?
Oh, absolutely. So you're talking about BLS ambulances versus ALS. So there are some ambulances that are higher equipped, but the beautiful thing is once you call 911 and you are answering that phone operator's questions about the type of emergency you're facing, the system knows what type of ambulance to dispatch to you.
So it's important to say then.
Oh, absolutely. And they'll walk you through the questions, because if you're calling 911, I would bet we're going to be a little anxious, especially if it's a loved one that maybe is unconscious. The one important thing is, you mentioned time sensitive.
Yes.
When we are dealing with cardiac arrest, literally every second counts. So if I were to go down with cardiac arrest and it might take 9 minutes for the ambulance to arrive here, for the paramedics to be giving me help, if no one has helped me, my chance of living has dropped to about 10%. So the statistics show that for every minute of delay, your chance of living drops 10%. However, if you knew CPR and you were willing to give that to me, you can almost triple my chances of surviving. So that's one of the initiatives that we're trying to do through Pulse 3, is make sure that everyone knows the simple act of CPR.
Has CPR changed? I took the course, it feels like a decade or two ago, but not since. Well, I took one refresher course. Has it changed? I understand sometimes they don't use the breath anymore.
Correct. There's been a big push in the last 5 years or so for hands-only CPR. And there's multiple reasons for that. Number one, people, you mentioned you had been trained many years ago. Do you remember even how many breaths and how many compressions?
No, I felt I killed Annie the dummy. But to get the right, now I understand it's as hard as you can do it. But walk us through that. Teach me what I need to know at this point of modernity.
Here's what we do. Let's say you happen to collapse, or all of a sudden you slumped over in your seat. My first thing would be to say, Junior, are you okay? To see if you would respond to me. And if you didn't, I would call 911, and then I would get you flat on the ground, so a flat, hard surface. I would check if you were breathing. So I would take maybe 10 seconds. I would look, listen, and feel. Do I feel your breath on my cheek? Do I see your chest rising and falling? And if that isn't, I'm going to put the heel of my hand in the center of your chest, so right here.
Where the sternum is?
Well, just a little bit higher. So if you take the heel of your hand, do you see how your middle finger's pointing to your underarm?
Yes.
That's right where you would give your compressions. So then I would interlock
That's really
my
at the
hands.
top of the sternum.
Yep, it's a little bit higher because our heart is right about here. So I'd put the heel of my hand there, and then I would start giving compressions. And we say fast, hard, and deep. So you want to go about 2 to 2.4 inches deep. So you're going a fair amount.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. You're going to have to use your energy. And in terms of speed, when we say fast, it's about 100 to 120 compressions a minute. So you're going to be moving along. Do you know the Bee Gees?
I don't
Staying
know that.
Alive?
No.
So there is a
Oh, the
disco
singing group.
song,
Yeah.
the disco song, right? Way back,
Yeah.
I don't even remember, was it the 70s?
Yeah.
But if you sing that song and you do your beats to that,
So sing it. Let's
that
hear
beat.
it.
Oh, I can't sing.
Well, then what good is this?
We will go, staying alive, ah, 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 staying alive. So if
So
I
that's
get
speed.
boom, 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 staying alive. Yep.
That sounds fatiguing. If you have help, how would you alternate?
So what I would suggest you do is, obviously you would be kneeling at the patient.
On a side? How
You
do
would
you
be on their side. So if this is the patient and this is the patient's head, I would be right here.
Okay.
So my knees are right
Does it
up
matter if
against
you're
their
on the
chest.
left side or the right
Does
side?
not matter.
Okay.
So if you have someone to help, you would have them be on their knees right on the opposite side.
Okay.
And the best thing to do is every 2 minutes. So maybe you give 200 compressions and then you switch out. And literally you're going to take your hands off their chest. They'll put their hands in the same spot where you were, and then they will begin.
And is it hand over hand?
Hand over hand. I like to say interlock because that gets you up on the heel of your hand,
Oh, interesting.
which makes it a little bit easier.
Yes, I
So,
see that. I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Yep.
We might as well do a tutorial. We're into one.
I should have brought some mannequins. I didn't even think of that. But it's what you raised the point, it's tiring.
Yeah.
And it is. And so even say I'm a certified CPR instructor.
Oh.
But if say one of the cameramen were to go down, it would be better for you to help me than for me to try and give CPR for 5 or 6 minutes because you do get fatigued. So I could say to you, hey, do you know CPR? And if you said, no, it's been 10 years since I've been trained, I would ask you to please just get down across from me. And when I'm done, you just put your hands in the same spot as mine and start giving compressions just like I did.
So it occurs to me, if I were going to do it, I would say there's 2 ways I could do it. I can either go like this, or I can lock my hand in place and then just bend my shoulders or my back over. Do you have a preference, or is there a preferred way?
Yes, and you're asking all the greatest questions. So you actually want to keep your elbows locked. So the power is not coming at all from your arms. It's coming from your back and your behind. It's the one time us women want to have big backsides. So your arms are really the pistons. They're the tool that's giving the compressions from your shoulders.
And then your back, does it want to bend at the waist or bend at the shoulders?
Yes. So you would be straight up on your knees,
Okay.
and your arms would be directly over the person's chest.
Okay.
So it would be a 90-degree angle, and
Okay.
when you're giving compressions, you would be going straight up and down.
Oh, interesting. After the program, we can't do it because of the microphones, but after the program, we are going to demonstrate on each other.
absolutely.
I want to know what
Yes.
2.5 inches
Yes.
is. I mean, that's sizable. It seems to me also you might be able to hurt a person either by doing it too shallow, or too deep. Is that an issue or not?
Well, the best compressions are those that are in that range, so 2 to 2.4 inches. The question of can you hurt someone doing CPR? Yes, especially if it's an elderly person. You could break a rib. But the issue that you're faced with at that point in time is dead
Right.
or maybe an injury. And
Yes.
so I have to believe if I help someone and they wake up in the hospital the next day, yes, they're going to be sore, but I bet they're going to hug me, and be thankful. In terms of shallow, you really just want to try to go as deep as you can.
Okay, so the body resists. Do you
Yes.
go for that point of resistance or through the point of resistance?
Well, you're just going, as you're giving your compressions, you just kind of keep an eye on the chest. And I will say over time, the more compressions you give, the more give there's going to be in that chest cavity. So I can't crack my knuckles anymore, but I have kids that crack their knuckles. You might, as you begin compressions, you might hear sounds like that. That doesn't mean there's bones breaking, it means the cartilage is loosening up. So
Now,
that's a good sign.
Can you tell, as someone giving CPR, that the heart has started again?
No, I don't think you would necessarily see that while you're giving CPR. What might happen is if the person regains consciousness, then you would stop CPR. So you give CPR when someone is not responsive and not breathing. So if you were to awaken and say, "What are you doing to me, Diane?" I would stop CPR.
Interesting.
So that's how we would know.
And does Pulse 3 offer training in this?
We absolutely do. We have free training sessions at least once a month. In the month of August, we actually have 4 free training sessions. So if people go look at our website, www.pulse3.org, there's a list of all of our classes that are coming up. We do free classes. We focus on 1 hour hands-only CPR, as well as how to use the defibrillator, those special units that deliver the shock to a heart.
You can learn this in 1 hour?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Honestly, there's tutorials on the internet.
YouTube?
YouTube, American Heart Association, you can watch some of those videos and you
For people
can learn.
who don't have internet access, you have a phone, right?
Absolutely.
A telephone.
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
And do you offer, talk to me a little bit about the defibrillators. There are different styles of them.
Right. So there has been a movement in the last 10 years or so to put automated external defibrillators. Short word is AED.
Yes.
To put those out into the communities and public locations. So that typically has been equipment that has been on those ambulances that you were talking about earlier. What we find is the quicker we can get defibrillation on a heart that is in an arrest, the better chances that person has of surviving, and surviving with good neurological capabilities. So what Pulse 3 has done, we've actually placed more than 170 of these throughout the community. Places like the Midland Center for the Arts, where Bob Lofiego was saved. Places like the City of Saginaw Fire Department, where Dave Rose, a firefighter coming back from fighting a house fire, was saved when he went into cardiac arrest while driving the rig. Places, the Midland Soccer Complex, the Saginaw
they kept it on the rig?
Complex.
Or
they kept it on the rig. He actually he was the driver of the fire truck, and he was stopped at a red light, and he looked over at his lieutenant in the seat next to him and said, "I feel weird." And then he lost consciousness. He was in cardiac arrest. They pulled him right out of the truck into the middle of the road, started doing CPR, and they grabbed the AED from under the seat, and they defibrillated him, and he's alive and well today.
What is the sequence between CPR and defibrillation?
And the defibrillation. So the goal that we all want to achieve is to begin CPR within 1 minute. 1 minute or less of someone losing consciousness. The AED, the goal is to have it on the person and working within 3 to 5 minutes. So you begin CPR. Typically, unlike that case with Dave Rose, you don't often have an AED right where the person has collapsed.
Yes.
So if we take, for example, the episode of Bob Lofiego at the Midland Center for the Arts. So he was actually in the theater watching a show. Usher, Tony, Sarah began CPR, and someone ran and got the AED from, I think it was by the volunteer, the concession area, and they brought it back. And so as soon as that AED arrives, you put it on the patient, and the AED will start talking. It will say, stand back, don't touch the patient, analyzing. And it'll take about 10 or 20 seconds, and it's reading that person's electrical activity. And then at that point it will say no shock advised, perhaps, continue CPR, or it will say shock advised, all clear, right? Because we don't want to be touching the person when the shock's delivered because we'll feel it.
Oh.
So it'll come to us too. We will be okay, but If any of us have, gotten a little zapped by the toaster or a plug,
Yeah.
that's what it would.
So the defibrillator comes with a measuring
Yes. All internal.
internal.
Yep, it's all internal.
That's
so
good.
we do not need, I am not a
Is that the
physician.
latest version of it?
Well, they've been around for a few years now. But yep, and we don't need to be medical personnel. They are considered lay people equipment. So that means anyone, regardless of training, can take it off the wall, or Delta College here, they're all over this facility. We could grab it and use it in an emergency. We do not need any special
let's
training.
just walk us through. Say we had an emergency. How would we find out where the AED is?
So
Here at Delta.
Here at Delta.
'Cause this is where we are.
Correct. So in Saginaw County, we are fortunate enough to be the 12th community in this entire country to implement a CPR alert system. So Pulse 3, in partnership with MMR, Mobile Medical Response, which is a local ambulance company, worked with an organization called Pulse Point to bring in a phone app. So if we were here and an emergency were to happen, as soon as I'm on the phone calling 911, I would look at my Pulse Point phone app and it would tell me where the closest AED is located. So it would GPS locate me to
fabulous.
maybe by the pool, is where they're often at in facilities like this. For regular people, so let's say we're sitting in here and my phone were to go off because in the building next door there's an emergency. I am a trained CPR responder, so I can get a text alert on my phone saying that there's a CPR emergency nearby. And it would GPS locate me to where that emergency and help is needed, and it would also locate the closest AED. So if I were able to, I could respond to that scene and provide assistance.
That's fabulous.
It is. It all came about actually from a fire department out in San Ramon, California. So the police chief was out to lunch with a techie, a software developer, and as they were eating, an ambulance pulled up to the store next door, and there was someone in cardiac arrest in the store. And this fire chief, who had an AED right out in his vehicle, was not aware that that emergency was happening. So he said to his friend, I could have helped. If I only would have known, I could have helped. So his friend, who was a software developer, said, well, we can fix that. And they began writing this software. They made it available. We actually heard about them through a YouTube video. There was a video, the power of social media, right?
Yeah, really.
We saw that and we gave them a call and said, can we do this in Saginaw?
Well,
So,
it's just
yeah,
really
it was wonderful.
Remarkable. So you have classes, you help buy these AEDs.
Correct.
In Bob's case, did he faint? How did they know to do anything if he's watching a program?
So what Bob had told me was that he and his wife Laura, they were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. They had just come back from Florida and were seeing a production of Rain, I believe it was, a Beatles tribute show. He had talked about being tired, and that I think he had said he went down to the concession area, and as he was walking back up, he just didn't feel right. And then he quickly lost consciousness.
Oh.
So as soon as those ushers and Tony responded, Tony was trained in CPR. He's very much an advocate of CPR and always has been. So even prior to this incident, he always has been.
Is everyone trained at all the ushers, etc., employees at the center?
If they weren't at that point, I would bet you they are now. Yep.
So can a private organization hire you, so to speak,
absolutely.
to come in and train their employees, or?
Absolutely. So we have been doing, along with Mid-Michigan Health, CMU, Saginaw Valley State University, the intermediate school districts, and MMR, we actually have formed a training collaborative where we are going out to area schools and making sure that they are prepared to respond to cardiac emergencies, not just the school and the administrators, but the students.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
Because, the chances are, if you are faced with this emergency, it's in your home.
Oh, yeah.
So we want to make sure that every home is equipped with the training they need to save a life. We've been to Dow Gardens, all those sorts of places to do training.
You mentioned there are 2 levels of ambulance service, ABS and
BLS.
And what is the difference?
So advanced life support and basic life support. And it just refers to the level of equipment that they carry in their rigs and the training of the paramedics. And beyond that, I would have to defer to those experts in terms of what's on those particular rigs.
It's just really fascinating. Now, I want to talk about your children.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
That's my favorite topic.
When I was just reading a little about the organization and you, I discovered that you have 3 children.
Yes.
And one is at West Point.
Correct.
And I would like to know a little bit about how you raised your children, or how did your parents raise you, or what values do you think it's important to help kids learn?
I think I was raised, and my husband and I have tried to raise our children with this sense of giving back. My husband is a police officer. He's always been a public servant. I've always worked in the nonprofit world. That's been my calling. And we've tried to raise our kids that way. My kids, volunteering wasn't really an option. They would joke that they've been voluntold to do things. You know, from the time we have a picture of, we were out gleaning in a field. Gleaning is the process of taking extra produce. So we were out picking extra produce from a farm. Yes, exactly. And we were bringing it to Hidden Harvest, which is a perishable food recovery and rescue program that serves this whole region. So since they were little, you know, peas in a pod, they've been doing things like that. My son actually, how he went on the path of protecting our freedom, serving in the military.
Liberty.
Right. He was in 8th grade and he came home. He had been somewhere with my brother. And he said, "Mom, do you know a place called West Point?" And I said, "I do." He goes, "I think I want to go to school there." And I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Do you even know what that's about?" And he said, "Well, I could be in the Army," right? Because at that point, for I almost said for Christmas, but for Halloween, he had dressed up as General Patton. He had dressed up as a UN peacekeeper. It was just a fascination he had had. So I said, "You need to start doing your research." So he started looking things up online, and I happened to know a Brigadier General, David Hall, who you may know. And I said, "Why don't you call this gentleman and ask him for coffee, and you can talk about what life is truly like in the military." Because it's not the fun you see, you know, the movies and the Hollywood version of it. And he did. And General Hall told him what a hard path he would be choosing. And he said, "You can't ever get in trouble. You have to get all A's. You have to be athletic. You have to be a leader." And he raised my son on that day because I never had an issue with him because he was so focused on achieving his dream. So he's in his first year. He's finishing up his last year there.
Oh my goodness! At West Point, it's really an engineering school, isn't it?
It is. It is. That's its formation or its tradition.
Yes.
So he is taking. All cadets have to take an an engineering track.
Yeah.
So his is environmental engineering, but he's actually double majoring in international relations and Chinese. So who knows what he might do with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Multifaceted. Has it been a good experience? What does he, if I may ask, what has he said about it?
Absolutely. He says in the very beginning, when they're making it not so much fun to be there, he did have moments of questioning, you know, have I done the right thing? And he said to me, "I've worked my whole life to get here, and now I'm wondering what I'm doing." So he had those moments of reflection. Now that he's past that, he knows. I mean, the world is open to him. The experiences he's been able to get through that organization have been phenomenal. The exposure to, you know, modern day heroes. Madeleine Albright has spoken to the cadets. Gary Sinise, you know, if you're into the Hollywood heroes, has been there and spoken to them. Experiences that I can't even imagine, you know, having at their young age.
It's a rough world, and I'm glad people are going into that as a calling. I always think if I see somebody in an airport or in the street who's dressed in fatigues, I always thank them, you know, so that I can worry about my hair or something.
Right, I know.
They're worried about my safety.
I know, I know. Well,
and America's liberty. Yeah.
And there are some absolutely wonderful young men and women that have answered that calling, and it truly is a calling.
It is the calling. Do you find, how does your husband, none of my business either,
No.
but how does your husband keep positive when sometimes he sees the underside
A lot of
humans?
negativity.
Yeah.
I think when you have faith and you have family, you know, you need to stay focused on that. So my husband and I, we've dated since we were 16 years old. So we've been together a long, long time. And when we were first married, work came home a lot. You know, we would talk about it, but we found just naturally as we had children, we started compartmentalizing. And that sort of stuff stayed at work, and family was kind of a safe haven. Nowadays, it's rough. It's rough out there. But I will say he had an experience just this past week, and I was so angry. He was eating lunch, and he was in uniform, and he noticed someone walking past the window, and this young person came back and stood by the window and took a selfie of himself with my husband in the background as he flipped this police officer off. And I was so upset, you know, when Al, my husband, shared that with me. But then we got to talking, and that week alone, a resident in the community he served came to the police department and gave them all Tim Hortons gift cards, which is kind of
The
ironic.
two sides of life.
Oh, yep.
We have had a wonderful time here with Diane. There's a lot to say, but I have very little time to say it in. So the very first thing is values, like that general said. All A's, athletic, be a leader, and work hard. Second thing, have a sense of service to your community and give back. Thirdly, to know that there are the high side and low side of all of us and people, and so you live on the high side of yourself. Okay, a wonderful week. Do something nice for someone you know and someone you don't know, and we'll see you next time.
To contact Junia, send her an email at info@juniadone.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadone.com. Thanks for joining us. See you next time for Uncommon Sense with Junia Doan.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.